Picture this. It's August 21st, 1986. A small, quiet village in the hills of Cameroon. Around 9 p.m., people hear this strange, rumbling noise coming from nearby Lake Nyos. Kinda sounds like thunder, but the sky is totally clear. They don't think much of it, and they head to bed. But they would never wake up. Because the next morning, an absolutely chilling silence hung over the entire valley. When help finally arrived from a neighboring village, they walked into a scene of complete and utter devastation. But it was strange. There were no signs of a struggle, no wounds, no one had even screamed. There were just bodies. 1,746 people, lying exactly where they had been the night before, in their homes, on the paths, just frozen in time. And it wasn't just the people. The silence was so deep, so profound, because everything that breathed air was dead. Around 3,500 livestock, cows, goats, you name it, all lay dead in the fields. Even the insects were gone. It was as if some invisible wave of death had just washed over the land, leaving everything untouched but completely lifeless. So what happened here? The mystery just baffled everyone. The first theories were all over the place, from a terrorist attack with chemical weapons to some secret government test gone horribly wrong, but none of the evidence fit. The only clue? The lake itself had turned this deep, rusty red color. The question on everyone's mind was, what invisible force could possibly erupt from a lake and wipe out an entire region overnight? Well, to find the answer, we actually have to rewind the clock 2 years. About 100 miles south of Nyos, there was another lake, Lake Moirai. And on August 15th, 1984, it gave the world a terrifying preview, a warning that tragically, almost everyone would ignore. The story from Lake Moirai was eerily similar. A loud noise from the lake, and then this strange, low-lying fog just crept down the road. The next morning, 37 people were found dead along that very road. Some had just fallen off their bikes, others died right in their cars. And again, no wounds, no signs of panic, just sudden, silent death. Okay, so let's get into the science of this. The local authorities were completely stumped, so they called in a volcanologist named Haraldur Sigurdsson to figure it out. He suspected a volcanic eruption released some kind of toxic gas, but all his initial tests found nothing. No sulfur, no weird heat in the water. The mystery was just getting deeper. And then he had his breakthrough moment. Sigurdsson took a water sample from the very, very bottom of the lake. As he brought the sealed bottle up to the surface, the pressure changed and boom! The cap blew right off with his violent fizz. This simple observation was the key to everything. The lake was behaving exactly like a shaken-up bottle of soda. The gas was carbon dioxide, or CO2, and it was the perfect culprit. Think about it. It's invisible, it has no smell, so victims wouldn't notice a thing. It's heavier than air, which is why it hugged the ground and moved like a fog. And when the concentration gets high enough, it just pushes all the oxygen out of the air, killing you almost instantly. It matched every single bizarre fact of the case. So you might be wondering, why doesn't every lake on Earth do this? Well, in most places, the seasons cause the water in a lake to mix up or turn over every year, so any trapped gases get released slowly and safely. But these lakes in Cameroon, they're in the tropics. There aren't really any seasons, so the water stays permanently layered or stratified. You get this cold, dense layer at the bottom with a warmer layer on top acting like a perfect cap. And here's how it all comes together in what's called a limnic eruption. For centuries, CO2 from volcanic vents under the lake had been dissolving into that bottom layer of water, just like the fizz in a soda can. The lake was literally becoming a time bomb. All it needed was a trigger, a landslide, maybe a small earthquake, anything to just disturb that cup of water on top. When that happened, that deep water rushed upwards, the pressure was suddenly released, and all that dissolved CO2 exploded out in one catastrophic burst. So Sigurdsson had solved the puzzle. He understood the danger. He had discovered a new, absolutely terrifying type of natural disaster. And he tried to warn the world, but, well, the world just wasn't ready to listen. This timeline right here is just heartbreaking. In 1985, Sigurdsson submitted his paper explaining the whole phenomenon, but the prestigious journal Science rejected it. Reviewers thought the idea of a lake erupting with gas was, well, they called it absurd, too far-fetched. Just 1 year later, their skepticism was answered by the deaths of 1,746 people at Lake Moirai. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a completely incredible one. gassy bottom layer. The pipe acts like a giant permanent straw. It lets that deep water rise, the pressure drops as it comes up, the CO2 fizzes out, and it shoots out the top in a steady, controlled fountain. It's a safe way to let the lake breathe. And it worked. So the stories of Manoon and Neos seem to have a resolution, right? Problem solved. But the threat of these limnic eruptions is far from over. In fact, those two lakes have a much, much bigger brother, Lake Kivu, right on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, this is where things get really scary. Just look at the jump in scale here. Lake Kivu contains roughly 1,000 times more dissolved CO2 than Lake Nyos ever released. And to make things worse, it has a massive amount of another dissolved gas, methane. But the most terrifying number, nearly 2 million people live right along its shores. Right. That methane gas adds a whole new layer of terror. Because methane is highly flammable. So if Lake Kivu were to erupt, you wouldn't just get a suffocating cloud of CO2. The erupting methane could actually ignite, creating a catastrophic firestorm over the lake and its shores. It is a double threat of almost unimaginable proportions. So faced with this incredible danger, Rwanda has come up with a brilliant solution. Turn the threat into a power source. They've built this floating platform that carefully pipes up that methane-rich water. They separate out the methane and use it to power a generator, which provides desperately needed electricity. It's a total win-win. They're reducing the danger in the lake while also powering the country. But here's the sobering reality check. This chart shows that at the current speed of extraction, in the next 25 years, they will have only removed about 5% of the total methane in the lake. The project is an incredible feat of engineering, for sure, but it is just not happening fast enough to make a real dent in the overall threat. And that leaves us with a really unsettling question, doesn't it? The story of Lake Moirai was a lesson about the devastating cost of ignoring scientific warnings. Today, we see an even bigger threat looming with Lake Kivu. We know the science, we see the danger, but the scale of the problem is just immense. It really forces us to ask, have we truly learned our lesson? Or are we, once again, underestimating the silent power that's brewing just beneath the water?